Assalamu alaikum, ahlan wa sahlan. Good morning, everybody. My name is Mani Sarathi. I'm coming to you from KAUST. And today we have a very interesting discussion about a book that I was only recently made aware of, Transforming the Future, Anticipation in the 21st Century. Now, you all must be very familiar with thinking about the future. You want a good future for yourselves, for your children, for your families, for your countries. But how does one take this vision of the future, translate it to the present, and actually make a plan for achieving the success? I recently learned that there's a science to this, and the presenters on the stage, many of them have been developing that science, that understanding of how the humans take an anticipation of the future, internalize it, and make it a reality. And that's what our discussion is going to be. We have 4 very distinguished panelists on our panel today, and each of them will give you some perspective about how this concept of what we call futures literacy can be used so that each one of us, each of you, can actually make a plan of how to reform your education system, reform policies, become better leaders, become better innovators. So I hope this is a very interesting discussion for all of you. I'm personally quite excited. And we will go through each of the panelists, we'll talk about their experiences, and then we will have a discussion with you, the audience members, to see how can you really take the learning about futures literacy and implement it in your daily life. I would like to open with the editor of the book, Dr. Riel Miller. He's the head of Futures Literacy at UNESCO, currently living in Paris. He has a PhD in the field of Futures Literacy and also design from New York. And he's going to be opening the discussion today, giving you all an overview about the theory of Futures Literacy and also its practice. Please welcome Dr. Riel.
Good morning. Thank you very much. It's a great, great honor to be here. Thank you to Dr. Fahad for inviting me, and thank you for being present. We good? Thank you very much for being present and for participating in this process, and thank you to my panelists who are also good colleagues and friends. I want to start with the question of futures literate. In the program, it says the future of literacy, but the issue here is what is futures literacy? It's not a term that's used very much. It's something that we're developing, but it does have a very close relationship to learning to read and write. When you learn to read and write, nobody tells you what to read afterwards or what to write afterwards. You can read and write many, many things. And reading and writing gives you the ability to explore new worlds. And that's really what futures literacy is about. Futures literacy is a way of exploring the world around us with an awareness of how you are using the future. Now, I'm not sure how it translates, and I'm sorry I can't speak your language, but in English, using the future is a term that's not very familiar. It's a phrase that's not very familiar. The other language that I speak, French, it's also not that familiar to say, use the future. But in fact, of course, we do use the future. We use the future right from before we can speak, because we use the future to cry when we want food. We anticipate. And if you roll a ball towards a child, a little child, and they see the ball coming, before it hits them, they will already react and move away, meaning they will anticipate that the ball's coming towards them. Anticipating the future is a basic characteristic of all human behavior. But the question is, do we think about it? Do we try to understand how we use the future? So one of the things that we noticed is that it's actually difficult to understand this problem, because the future actually is not there. We can't go there. It's invisible. And even our way of thinking about the future is invisible to us. We take it so much for granted that we don't think about how we think about the future. And that's what futures literacy is about. It's a way of trying to understand that we have anticipatory assumptions. In other words, when you have to describe something that doesn't exist, what's going to be happening in this room in 2 days, you have to use your imagination and you have to make assumptions. Now, we can assume that it will still be a ballroom and that it will still be a big hall and that there will be people doing something here. But maybe they'll be celebrating something instead of having a conference. We don't know, but we must make assumptions. To describe the future, you're obliged to use assumptions. Those are called frames, and we create these frames, and it depends why, what, and how we want to imagine. So it's like learning to read. It's a capability for the 21st century. It has a lot to do with our expectations. Let's take the example of learning that was just raised in the previous session. You don't always know what you're going to learn, but you have an imagination that allows you to say, I want to learn that, and to pull it towards you. And it's the power of your imagination that, for instance, allows us to move from push, I know what you should know, and I will tell you what you should know, to I don't know what I should know, I'm going to pull it towards me when I need it. So these are skills for the 21st century. Here's the book, and I have, it is a huge honor and a great pleasure for UNESCO and for myself to have had the book translated into Arabic. Very deeply grateful for that. I think it's a very important thing. And just so that you understand that this work is based on empirical evidence, as was mentioned, it's got a scientific foundation in the sense that we looked for evidence, we tested hypotheses. We said, if people think about the future using anticipatory assumptions, can we see that there are anticipatory assumptions out there? And these futures literacy labs that we've run around the world, and I'll just put the long list up here, these futures literacy labs across many topics with many different people show that we have anticipatory assumptions and that people can become aware of their anticipatory assumptions. This allows us to change the way people use the future. And that's the transforming the future that we're talking about in this book, changing the way people use the future. And the reason to become futures literate is that it helps to build hope from within. It's perception and action for development by overcoming poverty of the imagination. One of the things that's very striking about the world today is that the image of the future that people have sometimes seems like it came from somebody else, not from them. Sometimes it seems like a future that's almost impossible. I'll give you two quick examples. One is I was in Rwanda not so long ago in Africa, and I was working with 100 young people from the university. And the image of the future that they gave me was from a film done by Hollywood called Black Panther, which has an image of the future of Rwanda called Wakanda. Now, that was not their image of the future, it was the image of the future from somebody else. How can they become better able to create their own image of the future? 2 days ago, I was in Morocco, and I was talking to a young PhD student who said to me, my image of the future is that Morocco should become like France. And he said, but I don't think we're going to make it. And that's terrible. For one thing, it's not his future, it's some from somewhere else. But the other thing is that he feels pessimistic. He feels hopeless. And if there's no hope, if there's no hope, it's very difficult to motivate people, to give them a reason to invest. But not only that, it's painful for your identity. The meaning of life is connected to hope. And so if you can't create your own hope, it's very difficult to find meaning and identity. Futures literacy turns uncertainty from a liability into an asset. Change is no longer the enemy, but a source of inspiration and imagination. And finally, it reduces fear and defensiveness. It contributes to linking past, present, and aspirations. Let me say something very important about the way we're building futures literacy. This is fundamental to UNESCO. By getting people to understand better their own anticipatory assumptions, essentially we root them in their own history. And in that way, they're better able to create futures that are connected to their way of thinking about their world. So here's the Ptolemaic system. This is where the sun goes around the earth. Now, Copernicus had another system where the earth goes around the sun. But in a sense, if you're a farmer, what difference does it make if where the sun is? It makes no difference. The sun can be anywhere. You just get up in the morning and you do your farming. But it turns out that this does make a difference because it changes what we see, it changes what we imagine, it changes what we resist, it changes what we preserve, it changes how we preserve what we want to preserve, it changes the conditions of change. So I'll end there. Anticipation, how we anticipate matters, it changes the present. So that's my introduction to the book. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Miller. Very interesting to highlight the role of imagination. How many times do we tell our children, don't imagine too much, think about the reality of the situation. We stifle imagination so much in the way we normally educate our individuals and the way we plan our programs. So I think in the spirit of the previous talk, this one was very much in line in that we need to encourage people to think about different types of futures, give them hope to realize those futures and to implement plans to do that. Our next guest and panelist is Dr. Erik Overland, also very well versed in the area of future studies and is the president of Future Studies internationally. And he has a PhD in the field from the Free University of Berlin and worked many years with the European governments, Norwegian government in particular, about implementing policies for the future with a good understanding of future studies and the way human behavior is influenced by projections and anticipations of the future. So Dr. Overland, would you mind giving us your understanding of how this field has evolved in terms of research, in terms of implementation of policies, and also in relation to how we can make better systems for future studies and literacy going forward?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Do you hear me? Yeah. I'm very happy to be here. I represent, as you mentioned, the World Future Studies Federation, which is an international NGO founded back in the 70s, which organizes a network between futurists around the whole globe in all kind of regions in the world. We have members. But it's also, to think future is also a long tradition, but this tradition is not very well integrated in the conventional disciplinary disciplines within the academia, for example. And that's what we see and that's what we are working about. You mentioned that I made a PhD with the title, Is it possible to make research on what hasn't happened yet? I try to answer the question with a yes. And I try to argue in favor of that the necessity of being more systematic in thinking about the future. And that's what I also experienced that this book is about. Riel Miller is talking about futures literacy. I think that it's a very, very good term because to think consequently about the future, you have to learn that. You have to go into processes. It's a competences that you have to gain for yourself to be able to think creatively and systematically about the future. So that's what we are also trying to deal with within this federation. I'm also a founder of and editor-in-chief of European Journal of Futures Research. It's actually the first journal in the world who got futures research in the title. There are several other journals that addressing future issues also among academics and academic disciplines, but it's the first to take the word research on it. And I think that's also says something about the necessity and the importance of trying to relate this creatively future orientation towards conventional disciplines. When that is said, there's also a policy aspect in this. I've been, advising governments in different European countries. I've been also in the United States and in Canada. Also have been involved in some processes once. And also for the Norwegian government, and I see it's a really a huge challenge for policy developers and policy builders to think creatively about the future. And that's mainly, in my opinion, that they are very embedded in the tradition of forecasting. I don't know if you know the term forecast, which is something different than the future thinking that you advocate in this book, and which also advocates within the foresight, the international foresight and future studies tradition, also within the anticipation tradition. Because then you are using very often economic modeling things. You are saying immediately looking after the most probable future. And if you do that, you escape, the opportunity, you miss the opportunity to address possible surprises in the development. You are heading too much on the conventional expectations, and some, you ain't going to be creative enough in trying to imagine possible futures. So that's what the future field is about, in my opinion. That was also this book is addressing, namely, how are we supposed to be more systematic in our way to deal with the future, and how are we supposed to be more creative and more innovative in trying to imagine the future. And that's the reason why I endorse this book and find it very, very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Eric. I went to Dr. Overland's journal, and I found a very interesting paper by Yelena Bodine about pedagogies of the future. And she gave a quote in that paper by Albert Einstein, saying, "We cannot solve our problems with the same level of thinking that created them." And indeed, the problems that future generations face are extremely complex, are extremely important for the future of humanity and global environment and societies. And if we think that we apply the same way of thinking in how we created all these problems, those problems will never be solved. And I think that's what your objective is in terms of interacting with different governments. I teach a course, Sustainable Engineering, at KAUST, and I'm always baffled by the use of economic models and engineering models to predict things that they know nothing about. Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
So another important part about futures literacy is understanding that literacy is different in different cultures and contexts. And our next panelist, Dr. Nisreen Laham from Egypt, is the founder of a head of future studies across Africa and the Middle East. And she has taken a leading role in translating this very interesting book into Arabic. And I would like her to talk to us about her experience in translating the book to Arabic, and also in framing futures literacy in terms of cultural context of the Arab world.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and allow me to speak in Arabic, please, as most of the audience are Arabic speaking. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم جميعاً. بداية أشكر مركز أسبار على هذه الدعوة الكريمة، وأود أن أعبر عن سعادتي في وجودي في هذا البلد الطيب وسط هذا الجمع من الخبراء والمتخصصين في المجالات المختلفة والمهتمة بالمستقبليات والمهتمون بشكل عام بقضايا المستقبل. في الواقع عند تكليفي بترجمة كتاب تحويل المستقبل من قبل مركز أسبار كانت سعادتي غامرة لسببين. السبب الأول هو افتقار المكتبة العربية لمثل هذه المرجعيات الابتكارية التي تتناول المستقبل واستخدامه بأسلوب مختلف عما نعهده في دولنا العربية. فخلال رحلتي مع الدراسات المستقبلية وعملي في مركز المعلومات ودعم اتخاذ القرار ومركز الدراسات المستقبلية وهو المركز الفكري لمجلس الوزراء المصري، كنت أعمل في دراسات استشرافية تعتمد على صياغة السيناريوهات ومنهجيات متعددة للدراسات المستقبلية، إلا أنني لمست فجوة بين ما يتخذ من قرارات وما تخلص إليه هذه الدراسات من قرارات أو من توصيات. أيضاً الدراسات المستقبلية أو الاستشراف المستقبلي في وطننا العربي ما زال في بداية الطريق، فقد تعرفت عن كثب على كيفية قيام الدول المتقدمة بصياغة رؤاها المستقبلية، رؤى معمارية، وأيضاً كيفية استخدام المستقبل في اتخاذ القرارات في الوضع الراهن أو في الحاضر بناءً على ما هو ممكن وما هو محتمل في المستقبل. فما زال الطريق طويلاً أمامنا لاستخدام المستقبل بالطريقة الأمثل لاتخاذ قرارات رشيدة في حاضرنا. وفي الواقع كتاب تحويل المستقبل يمثل إضافة علمية في مجال الاستشراف لتبنيه نهج التوقع الذي يعتمد على منهجية تشاركية والعمل بروح الفريق، وهو ما تفتقر إليه دراساتنا في الوطن العربي. فهو يعرض 14 حالة دراسية لاستخدام هذا النهج في مختلف دول العالم، منها واحدة فقط قمت بإعدادها في دولة عربية. السبب الثاني لسعادتي بترجمة هذا الكتاب كانت لعدم وجود مرجعية للمصطلحات الاستشرافية باللغة العربية، وهو ما نفتقر إليه أيضاً. فبالرغم من أن كانت ترجمة هذا الكتاب كانت تجربة شيقة وممتعة أضافت لي الكثير، إلا أنني واجهت بعض التحديات، وهي كيفية صياغة مصطلحات أجنبية لم نعهد استخدامها باللغة العربية. أذكر منها على سبيل المثال عنوان الكتاب Transforming the Future. فما هو الترجمة؟ ما هي الترجمة الأصلح هنا لمفهوم أو مصطلح Transforming؟ في المعجم العربي Transforming هو تغيير الشيء بالكامل، لكن هل يقصد مؤلف الكتاب التغيير فقط؟ بلا شك هو يقصد أبعد من ذلك. هل يكون هو استخدام تعبير تحول؟ التحول ممكن أن يكون أيضاً دقيقاً، لكنه يمكن أن يرتبط بقوى دافعة وعوامل خارجية لا نتحكم فيها كالتغير المناخي وكتغير موازين القوى في عالمنا المحيط. فهو أيضاً المعنى من مفهوم الكتاب Transforming هو أبعد من ذلك. يعني قلت يمكن استخدام مفهوم تحويل المستقبل يمكن أن يكون أقرب إلى الدقة، لكنه أبعد إلى أن يكون مستزاغاً لأذن القارئ العربي. لكن أيضاً ارتأيت أن يكون هذا ممكن أن يكون حافزاً لاستثارة العقل العربي والقارئ العربي للتفكير في ما هو تحويل المستقبل وماذا يمكن أن يكون هذا التحويل، ويعني كدعوة لقراءة الكتاب وأيضاً التطلع عليه. هذا من ناحية. من ناحية أخرى كانت هناك إشكالية أخرى أيضاً، وهي اختلاف المصطلحات العربية فيما يتعلق بالاستشراف المستقبلي في دول المنطقة، بالذات بين المشرق والمغرب، وهي إشكالية أيضاً يجب أن نتصدى لها وأن نضع لها قواعد وأسس. وهنا رجعت إلى أستاذ في المستقبليات، أستاذ الدكتور أحمد شوقي، وهو رئيس تحرير كراسات مستقبلية ومؤسس المكتبة الأكاديمية في مصر. فكان رأيه أن المطروق هو أهم من المتروك، بمعنى أن الهدف هو أن يفهم الغالبية العظمى من المنطقة ما هو المقصود بهذه المصطلحات. فكان هناك حواراً مطولاً بيننا، وعمدنا إلى الرجوع إلى ما تناوله أستاذي ومعلمي أستاذ الدكتور محمد إبراهيم منصور رحمه الله في ترجمة بعض ما تناولته أعمال دكتور ريل ميلر في محاضرات أخرى بمنهج التوقع أو نهج التوقع. ويمكن هنا أن تكون دعوة لمركز أسبار للقيام بإعداد معجم للمصطلحات الاستشرافية باللغة العربية، ليكون بالإمكان تعميمه على سائر الدول العربية، وليكون أيضاً الأساس لإنتاج استشراف مستقبلي باللغة العربية، وهو ما نحتاجه بالفعل على مستوى متخذي القرار، وعلى مستوى الباحثين والأكاديميين، وعلى مستوى العامة أيضاً، ليتعرفوا على الاستشراف والابتكار والتخيل والإبداع من سن الطفولة، لكي نبدأ بجيل عنده هذه القدرة على التخيل وعلى استخدام المستقبل بما نرمي إليه بهذا المفهوم. وهذا يتماشى أيضاً مع رؤية المملكة العربية السعودية 2030 والدعوة إلى إيجاد مجتمع معرفي، والتحول أيضاً في هذه الرؤية. كلمة التحول مذكورة في الرؤية، فهناك توافق أيضاً مع هذه الرؤية لإعادة تشكيل العقل العربي وخلق تيار وطني يعتمد ويؤصل الدراسات المستقبلية والمنهجيات الرصينة لاتخاذ قرارات أكثر رشادة ولصنع مستقبلنا. وهنا أستحضر ما يقوله دائما أستاذي دكتور محمد إبراهيم منصور رحمه الله: اصنع مستقبلك قبل أن يصنعه لك الآخرون، لأنهم لو صنعوا مستقبلنا سيصنعوه وفق أجندتهم هم ووفق أهدافهم هم. فنحن الآن في مرحلة تحولية في هذه المنطقة، وأجدر ما يكون بنا أن نرسخ هذه الدراسات والمنهجيات المستقبلية من خلال معجم عربي، ومن خلال إنتاج دراسات مستقبلية وتعميمها ونشرها على مستوى الوطن العربي. ويمكن أن يكون لمركز أسبار أيضاً دور هنا بتشبيك مراكز الدراسات المستقبلية في الوطن العربي، ليكون مركزاً إقليمياً يعمل على هذا تعميم الدراسات المستقبلية على المستويين، على المستوى المحلي وعلى المستوى الإقليمي. أكرر شكري لمركز أسبار على مبادرة ترجمة هذا الكتاب، وأدعوكم للاطلاع على النسخة الرقمية الموجودة هي على موقع مركز أسبار، وأيضاً يمكنكم الحصول على نسخة ورقية منه من المركز. وأنا فخورة جداً أن كان لي دور في ترجمة هذا الكتاب، الذي أعتقد أنه سيكون بداية لإنتاج أكبر وإنتاج أوسع في الدراسات المستقبلية بالتعاون مع مراكز الدراسات المستقبلية المختلفة. وشكراً لكم.
Thank you very much for that very insightful translation and discussion about the book. I would like to now move to our final panelist, Dr. Riyad Najm. Dr. Najm is not a social scientist like the rest. He's a technologist, and he is the former president of the General Commission for Audiovisual Media, and he has almost 40 years of experience in regulating media and technology in the region. I think something I learned very interesting about Dr. Najm is he's good at telling the future. I saw a video of him in 2011 or 2012 where he was asked, will the 3D television become ubiquitous? Will everybody have access to 3D television in a few years? And a lot of media people were saying the sports games will be in 3D, the news will be in 3D at that time. Well, here we are in 2018, and at that time in 2012, Dr. Najm said, I don't think 3D television is ever going to take off very big. And he was right, okay? But we're not going to ask him to predict the future today, but we're going to ask him about what he thinks the role of technology is in terms of future literacy, and how we can embrace technology or use it to our own benefit to shape the outcomes that we want in the future.
Thank you. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First, I would like to thank Asbar for inviting me to take this challenge of discussing an area which is outside my specialty and my expertise. But I will do the best that I can, and since, as the moderator mentioned, that I'm not a sociologist or a psychologist, I'm a technologist or an engineer specifically. If you hear something a little bit out of the norm or unusual, don't be surprised. As is mentioned, I would like to look at this subject in terms of the technical part and the technical element of it. Now, the buzzwords that we have nowadays is the artificial intelligence, the big data, and machine learning. Now, what has been happening in the past, like what the UNESCO has done, and Mr. Miller has contributed a lot of work into writing this book, which I fully appreciate. Probably what we could add to what the human element was introduced to predict the future and anticipate it is to use the technologies that we have nowadays. We know artificial intelligence is being applied now in many areas. In one of the previous sessions, we heard how it is applied in medicine and predicting the likelihood of contracting specific disease based on the history of patients and on the environment that they are living in. And some of these researches go up to the extent that to predict when that particular patient is going to contract a specific disease. Artificial intelligence is also used in economics and in stock markets. I see a lot of some distinguished economists here in the floor, and I'm sure some of them would want to predict what's going to happen in a stock market in a given environment. And now there are studies that can predict that. Also, there is another area of using artificial intelligence is in crime predictions. And in some countries now, they are using this concept to predict what's the likelihood that a certain crime is committed by a certain individual based on his record and his history and also in the environment he is living in. So having said that, it is always possible that we can use all these technologies to predict and anticipate the future. Now, the objective of doing that is not really something academic, but more to be able to anticipate the future in a much faster and more hopefully efficient way. And the way I would think about this is that we can do this machine prediction of the future and anticipation, and then compare it to what is called in the book the Future Literacy Lab, which is conducted by individuals and experts in a specific field. And after we do both the machine expectation and anticipation and the human anticipation, we can compare and see which one is going to be more realistic and more comparable and actual that conform to the presence and also to the future when it happens. By this way, we can probably have another element that Mr. Miller can add to his book, and that is using machines to anticipate and predict the future, probably more collectively, not in specific fields. Now, maybe somebody would say, well, machines are unable to predict the conscious and the subconscious. Well, probably with the present day of technology, maybe this is true, but more and more we learn and know that it is possible to also predict to a certain degree how people are ready to think or behave in a certain way, given certain environments and certain factors that they are aware of. Having said all of that, perhaps maybe there is one aspect that I would like maybe to a little bit mention, and that's not completely technical, but it is to do how do we look at the future based on certain beliefs that we have. Now, an individual or an organization or a nation, sometimes we have this belief that we cannot change the future. And we fix ourselves to the present and the past, and we think, why should we bother about this? I believe this is one part and one difficulty that we have to overcome. It is probably one obstacle that prevents some of us to develop and to compete with the others in different disciplines. We probably need to look at this in a more realistic and scientific ways. And although we cannot influence the happening in the future, but as Mr. Miller has said, we can always behave in the presence based on our anticipation and wishes that we would like to have a bright future. So these ways of not being able to predict should not always be an obstacle for us to live a prosperous life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Riyad. So I hope you've all learned something useful up till now. Futures literacy, or you can say reading the future, is a skill. Okay, it's a skill that several individuals have studied in great detail and developed a whole science around it. But of course, it's a skill that all of us have, we can develop, and it's something we should encourage in our societies to solve more complex problems. How we develop the skill is offered in the book as well as in workshops. I sincerely hope there's a workshop organized in Saudi Arabia sometime. And if there's not, I'd be happy to help organize one at KAUST. I'll put it out there right now. And I would like to draw upon one important factor of this concept of futures literacy. And what I found in different articles and in the book as well is that interdisciplinary nature of education, policy, cultures, understanding of technology is required. People have to discuss how they view the future from different lenses or glasses, you can say, and that helps to paint a picture or formulate a solution. So, given we've already heard some diverse viewpoints here on the stage, Dr. Riyad talks a lot about embracing or using technology to help facilitate understanding of the future, and Dr. Eric and Dr. Reel will maybe understand more from a social science or behavioral perspective how understanding human thinking and culture could be more beneficial to embracing future. So I'd like to put it out there to you all, as you go to different societies or cultures and everybody embraces technology in different ways. How do you embrace that to ensure that ideal solutions are actually provided? And maybe we could start with Eric and then to Reel.
Yeah, I think, when you go and visit different countries, you also are meeting different cultures, different ways of doing things. But what I see is that the one major similarity is, and that is that you are not very professional in approaching the future. And so you have normally a lot of potential to be more professional in addressing future issues on all kind of levels. I mean, it's on the political level, it's on the corporate level, it's on, you can think about that in all different areas and all different societal levels. When that is said, in my opinion, I think it's two things that you have to address very properly, and that is somehow the democratic implicit message of doing future research. Because if you don't believe in only forecasting and predictions, you have to say that the future is open, and your perspective is as important as my perspective. So we have to, join our forces and join our ideas, exchanges as a part of this. And that's also what I think is one of the main messages from this book, is to demonstrate how you can be open about future possibilities. When that is said, it's also a second thing, and that is related to what you are talking about, the prediction aspect of it. Because when you are addressing future issues, you have, if you, for example, try to imagine a situation in 30 years of time, you have a certain idea about what can we expect with a certain kind of certainty. So you have to think around these things too, and the certainties can change. And what can you not expect with a certain kind of certainty, and that means uncertainty analysis. So you have to go into uncertainty analysis. So in the time we are in now, in my opinion, these kind of aspects are changing a lot. So you are talking about big data, which is help us very much on so we could do some prediction analysis that we might predict some aspects of the future more better now than we could for only 10, 20 or 30 years time ago. But then it creates other kind of uncertainties that you have to go into. So here is you know, it's always a game between certainty and uncertainty. You have to find a good mixture, good balance between those.
Very important and very interesting question. Let me say for one thing, one of the implications here is to be much more humble about the way we think about the future, and to be much less persuaded that, which is an assumption, that we can colonize tomorrow, that we can impose our will on tomorrow. So one of the key aspects here is to be more humble. But let me take an example where I think we could combine AI, artificial intelligence, big data, and simulation, and create a very interesting game so we could play. Let's call it the game of life. And you could go through the game of life in simulation, and there are actually quite a few games like this for children and some for adults, where you would project the future of your life. But we all know, and I think I can safe to say everybody in this room would know that the prediction that you did based on that game, the game that you played, based on big data and the statistical averages, you wouldn't say, oh, for sure, this is the way I'll be happy. You don't know how many children you'll have. You don't know how your love life will go. You don't know what kind of work or world you'll be living in. So we become with age wiser. And one of the key aspects of futures literacy is related to wisdom. And the wisdom to understand that the world is exactly this, something that emerges, that we cannot know in advance. And that one of the key aspects is to be better able to use the future, our idea of the future, in order to understand what's happening to us in the present. And that can be done with technology, because we are in symbiosis with our tools. It can be done through education, because that's one of the ways that we learn. But fundamentally, this is about a skill that connects us to the world.
Thank you very much. We know very well that the kingdom has a vision for the future, and many Arab countries have a vision for the future in the next decade or two. Dr. Nisreen, can you talk to us about maybe your understanding of future study in the region, in the Middle East and North Africa, and how this is tied in with the visions of different countries, and how regular people, leaders, policymakers can help to realize that future?
في الواقع أنا اطلعت على رؤى عديد من الدول وطلعت عليها اطلاع يعني عميق لأن كنت مشاركة في صياغة رؤية مصر 2030 في مركز الدراسات المستقبلية. ونحن لدينا رؤى جميلة جدا في الدول العربية، فرؤى عندما نطلع عليها سنجد مستقبلا مشرقا. لكن الإشكالية هي كيف نحول هذه الرؤى المعيارية والاستهدافية إلى واقع عملي؟ كيف نتحول من الرؤية إلى الخطة إلى الواقع؟ وكيف نستخدم المستقبل في قرارات ومشروعات تنفذ هذه الرؤية؟ وهنا الفجوة بين ما نصيغ من رؤى وبين ما نحقق على أرض الواقع. هي كلها رؤى جميلة وتستهدف مستقبل مشرق، لكن ما ينقصنا هو تحفيزنا على صياغة هذه الرؤى وتحقيقها بالفعل على أرض الواقع.
Thank you very much. I would like to open the floor to questions from the audience. Please feel free to ask anything to any of the panelists. We'll start here at the third row in the back. Is there a microphone? The third row, yes. Kindly introduce yourself and present your question.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Mr. President Saleh Butaish. My question is regarding the future literacy. Future literacy or reading the future is assumptions or sometimes imagination driven. We are living in a rapidly changing world. So the future reading is becoming more and more difficult. How do you see this? Sometimes we design a scenario based on certain variables, and then all of a sudden, all the variables are changing, and our scenario collapse. So how do you see this? Thank you.
This is a very important question, and I'll try and give you a very brief answer since we don't have a lot of time. But from my perspective, and I think it's the perspective of complexity theory in the 20th century and today, is that the world has always been very complex, and surprises have happened all the time. If I think of my grandparents, they lived through surprises in some ways that were much bigger and much more difficult than the ones I've lived through. I've been very lucky in many ways. So what I'm trying to say simply is that this ability to use the future is something that's always been important for humanity, and we've used it in different ways in different times. Today, I believe that one of the crucial aspects is that we're connected and interdependent, and therefore we need to be able to understand each other's thinking about the future. So one of the reasons why the discipline of anticipation and futures literacy is important today is because, in fact, we have to be able to make sense together of the way we're thinking about the future. And this means we must create a common and shared language for understanding, not for being the same, but for understanding our differences together so that we can live together on this planet. And futures literacy, I think, in part addresses the challenge, which is a common challenge because thankfully, because of interpreters and because you are able to understand me, we can use a language like English to understand each other. In other words, we create cognitive, knowledge-based foundations for understanding each other and working together. Futures literacy is part of that, including the development of many scenarios, but not only that.
I'm going to take one question from the ladies, just to be fair, and then we're going to close this session. Over there, please. Yes. Can we please get the microphone?
Yes, this is Maha from the Ministry of Education. We know that according to neuroscience, there are 3 levels of brain. The conscious, the subconscious, and now they are talking about the superconscious. So is the superconscious similar or a synonym of anticipation? Or is it connecting it to it? What is your explanation to that?
Dr. Nasreen, want to try?
No.
No? Eric?
Well, of course, this is that's a very important question within the field of neurosciences. I have a colleague within the Federation. His name is Tom Lombardo. He's written several books about the future of consciousness, and he's discussing a lot of these kind of issues in his books. And what I think is very important here is that if neuroscientists would sit down together and discuss what could be the future of consciousness, the structure of consciousness, which go beyond what we expect today, that would be a very interesting exercise to advocate and to carry through. So, yeah.
Just one little thought on that. A fish has a difficult time understanding that they're in water. A fish is in water, they don't know that they're in water. One of the aspects of futures literacy is precisely this super consciousness dimension, which has to do, how do I create some distance between myself and the world I'm living in? How do I understand that I'm living in the moment, but that the moment is connected to the past and the future? And so this is one way of having metacognition and enhancing our capacity, so capability-based, education-based approach to metacognition.
Okay. I'd like to thank all the panelists. I'd like to thank the audience for participating. I think we've all learned about a very rich and complex subject today. I, in particular, have really enjoyed this conversation. Maybe I'll make things a bit simple and provide you my takeaway notes. It's quite simple, I think, what they're trying to communicate here. Be humble, be hopeful, embrace the future, and be happy.
Thank you very much for the panelists. عندنا إعلان بسيط في بريك إن شاء الله ينتهي الساعة 1 ومعرض ندعوكم جميعا لزيارة معرض كاوس اللي هو كان عبارة عن 9 سنوات من العمل الدؤوب في الجامعة بدأت كأبحاث علمية عدت إلى براءة اختراع البراءة اختراع إلى منتج محلي وبعضها منتج عالمي فندعوكم تشرفونا في زيارة المعرض في الصالة المقابلة. Dear guests, we would like to invite you to visit our exhibition for the cows. It resulted out of 9 years of hard work, and most of this research work lead to patents, and those patents lead to local and international products. So we'll be welcoming you at our exhibition in the next hall. Thank you very much.